It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Dr. Lothar Krinke, CEO of Welcony. Welcony is the global neurotechnology leader that supports thousands of research labs, clinics, hospitals, and universities that focus on mental health, brain disorders, cognitive neuroscience, and neuromonitoring. Welcony's inspired neurotechnology is changing lives worldwide, and Lothar's passion is to help improve patient outcomes. Previously, Lothar was the Vice President and General Manager of the Medtronic brain modulation business and started his career at McKinsey and Company. He is also an adjunct assistant professor position in neuroscience at West Virginia University. Lothar Krinke, welcome into the corner office.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Great to have you here as well. And we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and gosh, I felt we should have recorded the podcast then because we got into so many things about your business and what you do, and I've just been so excited to be able to talk to you today. But, before we kind of jump into Welcony and the wonderful stuff that your folks are doing, let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your early years, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Yes, so first of all, I need to apologize. I do have a little bit of an accent. That some of your listeners will probably recognize. So you will accurately place me as a person who was born in Germany. So I grew up in a German town close to Hanover, which is not that far from the East German border, and grew up in a great family. In my grandparents, my parents would live together in a house, and it had really a huge impact on me. There's two things, that I really remember that shaped my life. One was that my dad, no matter what bad things might have happened in his past, he always looked at the positive aspects of anything. And so I think I took that away from my dad. And then, my grandparents, I was spending a lot of time with them. They were absolutely into watching science programs on TV. Maybe that sort of made me be really interested in getting into science and later on into business.
Influenced you, yeah. Now, is that father's parents or mother's parents?
Mother's parents.
Yeah. Mother's parents, yeah. Awesome. Multi-generational family. I love that. Brothers and sisters?
I have two brothers. One is still in my hometown, and it's close to my parents who are still around, which I'm really thankful for. And then my other brother, we are all kind of international travelers. So he lives in London, I live in Minnesota, but we do go back to Germany quite a bit.
So you grew up in West Germany, but not too far from the East German border, and it was during the times of separation. It's hard to see. It's been almost 30 years now since the Berlin Wall came down. But what was that like? Was it evident to you that there were two different Germanys at the time? And if so, how did that impact you growing up, or did it at all? Was it something you didn't even think about?
Yeah, it did impact me quite a bit. So first of all, we work very close to the East German border, so just about every school outing had us see the wall, or in fact what we called the Zonengrenze. So the wall is really in Berlin, but the border between East Germany and West Germany was very fortified, and we got to see this and said, well, there are the other Germans on the other side. So that's number one. I also lived very close to a military installation that literally had missiles, I think from the British or maybe the Americans. And so it was pretty evident to us if there was ever going to be a war between East and West, it would be right there where I lived.
Wow.
And finally, I have a lot of relatives on the eastern side, so I actually got to go over occasionally and meet my family, and so that was very evident to me. And obviously,
you saw firsthand the different lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And the challenges and so forth they had there. So they allowed you to go back and forth. Was it kind of structured visits, or how did that happen during the time you were in school?
Well, as a West German, you could go over to East Germany because there was one rationale, and that is East Germany needed Western currency. And so if you went over, you had to exchange German marks to a crazy exchange rate into East German marks. That, by the way, you couldn't buy anything for because most hotels were requiring West German marks. But
of course,
you could go over. I mean, it would take forever to make it over the border. And, I remember one trip with my dad. I kept on getting pulled over, and they were hoping that I had drank some alcohol so they could, fine me. But I never drank any alcohol, so they never, and I guess I must have followed the traffic rules, so nothing ever happened to me. Yeah.
Now you were still living in West Germany when the wall came down. Is that correct?
That is not true. I had so early in my life, I was always interested in international travel. I had done an exchange program to France. I had done one to England, and so when I was in college, I had applied for an exchange program to Israel. That didn't work out, but I was told, well, the Israel exchange program isn't going to work, but there's an American one, and so I ended up in '84 signing up for an exchange program to New York. So this was between Braunschweig, which was the university very close to the border, and came to the U.S. So I was literally in the U.S. when the wall came down.
When the wall came down, yeah.
But I should say I returned back to Germany because the wall came down. That totally changed my career. I thought I was going to be a scientist. I was doing postdoctoral work at the California Institute of Technology, and I thought I was going to be a professor in the future. The wall came down, and I thought, dang it, I need to be in Germany. I want to be part of this. So so I ended up joining McKinsey, a German consulting firm, international consulting firm. And because that allowed me to move to Germany and be part of this amazing time of reunifying two countries.
Fabulous.
And had that not happened, maybe I would have stuck, and I might have stayed in academia.
Life. Yeah. Well, we would all have been poor because of that. But you never know, right? Those career decisions are always so momentarily and fleeting sometimes. I know I've certainly made a couple of those in your life. What was the big shift then? So you joined McKinsey here in the States, and then they brought you over to Germany, or did you actually return to Germany and join McKinsey there?
Yeah, I joined McKinsey in Germany. Now they did recruiting. They recruited in the U.S. because it is at the end of the day an American company, so you need to be like bilingual.
Of course.
So that's how I joined. And I guess my biggest asset was I was bilingual. And I was at Caltech, which is not a slagger school.
I won't even ask if you were a good student, because once I knew you got into Caltech, that was no slacker. That's for sure. And then what were some of those first assignments then? Were you working on some of the things that were building the bridges between East and West at the time with McKinsey?
Yeah, that had originally been the plan. So one particular project was really related to a chemical plant. So there was a German chemical company, and they had acquired for, I don't remember, maybe 1 mark or maybe nothing. They acquired a very large chemical plant in East Germany that was manufacturing silicone. So one of my assignments was to figure out, well, was that a good purchase or not? I mean, it was free, but could you build a business out of that? That was really fun to see, because while there were all kinds of environmental issues, East Germany had really good technology, particularly in chemicals.
Right. And what did you find?
Well, we essentially found that they had the best quality silicone in the world.
Really? Wow.
And that they had focused too much maybe on sort of commodities, and that really what they should be focusing on was sort of the higher end silicone market. Now, this is at the same time as silicone implants for aesthetic purposes obviously
Right.
got in trouble, so that was a negative impact.
Hmm.
But there clearly was a big market for silicone around the world, and today, I mean, medical devices, silicone is used for a lot of medical devices.
That's
That
right.
was the
That's
finding.
right.
Yeah, you wouldn't have
Yeah.
expected them to have the highest quality silicone, but they did.
Awesome. Awesome. And were all your 7 years with McKinsey in Germany then, or did you come back over to the States during that period?
Oh, I forgot to mention. So, as it goes, usually, when you come to a country in as a young bachelor, I met my wife in the U.S.
Okay. Right.
By the way, side note, she's Ukrainian, so obviously not a good time for her right now.
Oh.
So she came with me to Germany. One of my sons was actually born in Germany, but after 3 years, it was time to pack the bags and come back to the United States. So I continued
Yeah.
working with McKinsey and then with another consulting firm in the United States, because that's a nice thing about international companies. They move you around and you actually have
Right.
some input on that. Yeah,
Right. Right. And when you look back at those consulting years, I know you went on to A.T. Kearney after
that's right.
you were at McKinsey. It's a very different role than being an operational role. And you've obviously done that. I know we want to talk a little bit about your time at Medtronic. So you spent 13, 14 years there, and of course Welcony. We'll get to that as well. But as a consultant, did you find that your input and your ability to be able to steer some of your clients satisfactory, from kind of an engagement professional standpoint, or were you frustrated with regards to, you making recommendations and then, the client decides not to, thank you very much, here's your paycheck, but, they don't implement those things. If you put that all on balance, what was your experience as a consultant?
Yeah, look, it's it's probably the best training ground
Yeah.
in business that you can have, besides obviously getting an MBA. But it is real, true life work on very important topics with very
Right.
large clients. And you learn a lot because you move around very quickly. You get very little time to come up with solutions that the client had not thought about. So this is amazing what you learn and the impact you can have. No doubt. Okay.
Right.
I would recommend to any person that wants to learn business quickly to consider a career in management consulting. Now, you made
Yeah.
an important point here. At times, it can be frustrating to be a
Right.
consultant. So that's the old joke, right? If you made a good recommendation, then it was actually the client's idea. If it was the bad one, it was your fault. So the one thing that you can never do as a consultant saying, hey, trust me, I
Right.
will make this
Right.
work. I put my own risk behind this. I will make this work. Trust me. You can't do that. It needs to be analytical and it's up to the client to implement.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
exact opposite
Right.
is true for a small company. There,
Right.
it is actually appreciated when you say, trust me, I'll get it done because my career's on the line here, and
Sure.
I will be as successful as the company is. So that is the major difference. So in the other way around, I would also encourage everyone who is a consultant to maybe spend some time in a small or larger company to see what it's like to actually
Right.
implement.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Because it is
Now, did
highly
you have?
satisfying. Okay. So someone
Yeah.
very smart
Absolutely.
asked me once, what's the best part when you have an engagement, a business engagement or a business deal? Okay. It is not when you present your recommendations. It is
Right.
not when you close your business development deal or your acquisition.
Yeah.
It is when you actually turn the strategic move into true value
Yeah.
for your customers, your investors, and your employees,
Implementing the
actually, sorry.
implementing the recommendation. Yeah. Absolutely.
That is fun. That is incredibly
Right.
satisfying. And you as a consultant usually
Did you
don't get
start
to see
managing
that.
people? Did you have leadership responsibility at McKinsey and Kearney?
Yeah, so I went through the ranks in consulting from associate to senior
Right.
associate to manager, senior engagement manager, and eventually made partner at A.T. Kearney, was called vice president at
Yeah.
the time. So I did have management responsibility. In fact, you start to get management responsibility very early in your career, and that moves very quickly, right? So you might have a 3 months project and you have a team, you're responsible for that
Right.
team, and then you roll over to the next project, you have a brand new team. The good news is you really get some training for how to manage people, tools and how you assess. You're young at the time,
Sure.
right? I mean, you're in your 30s. You learn how to manage your internal team. What's their skills and what's their ability, what's their will, but more importantly, you learn how to influence your
Right.
client. And your client are typically people that are a ton older than you, by all measures have more experience than you, and you need to convince them that you're on their side and that you develop a recommendation that they would
Right.
implement. And quite
Right.
frankly, you use their time and their employees' time. So I think it's even more important that you learn to develop influencing
Yeah.
skills
Absolutely.
versus just management skills. Leadership is much more important than
Right.
management, in my mind, in really any senior
Right,
role.
right. So leading Kearney, you had a couple of different jobs in business development, and then I want to talk a little bit about your long-term, time at Medtronic. So were you in operating roles there? I know you were working on, some pretty interesting stuff that's led to Welcony, and I kind of want to lead up to that. But, were you based in the U.S.? Tell us a little bit about the time that you were at Medtronic.
Yeah, so prior to Medtronic, I should mention this. I was actually with a small startup company, and we worked on stem cell research. So these would be endogenous stem
Right.
cells, and the idea was to use them for applications in treating cardiac disorders such as
Uh-huh.
infarcts. And that really got me exposed to Medtronic because Medtronic at the time had a program or even a joint venture with Genzyme to use cells. In this case, these were actually muscle-derived cells to implant them into
Wow.
patients to treat their myocardial infarction.
Right.
And so that got me interested in Medtronic, and I ended up working for Steve Osterly, who was then the chief medical and technology
Right.
officer. And I came on board to be a technology scout, so I didn't really sell the company. I was there and had a business development role. Medtronic didn't buy the company, but they liked me, so I um, came on board to look around the world to see what, if anything, should Medtronic do in
Mm.
biotech. So my role was to figure out whether Medtronic should get into biotech. And I did that for not very long, a little bit more than a year. The then CEO, Bill Hawkins, took an interest in me and one day puts me, I have a coaching session with him and he says, Lothar, you need to be in an operating company. If you want to have a long-term senior career at
Mm.
Medtronic, you need to be an operating company. This is how this works around here. So the next day, I was in the neuromodulation division, running business development, and eventually I ran research and business development and IP. Ran some brain infusion programs, and that all got me really interested in applications of technology to the human brain,
Fascinating
right?
area.
That's the
Yeah.
frontier.
Yeah.
And so I ended up running the deep brain stimulation business as GM. So that was at the time about the $400 million business, and did that for a couple of
Yeah.
years.
And what products did
Um,
Medtronics have at that stage for them?
yeah, so this the neuromodulation division started really in spinal cord stimulation, but deep brain stimulation it was part of neuromodulation, and I ran that business. So deep brain stimulation is a technology. Think of it as a pacemaker for the
Right.
brain. It's approved for Parkinson's disease, for dystonia, essential tremor, epilepsy, and OCD. And I enjoyed it very much to run a global business. So you might wonder, why the heck did they think I had any credibility to run a business after being the business development and research neuroscience guy? But the rationale was I'm bilingual, so I have European experience. DBS really came from Europe. Obviously, I had some business
so
training
deep
in
brain
my
stimulation
past.
came from Europe originally, is that correct?
Yeah, well, so the original discovery or invention of DBS for Parkinson's was done in Grenoble.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so many people will trace the roots of DBS to Europe. This were actually where the market took off early on, and also DBS got approved in Europe much earlier than in the United States.
Interesting.
So that's why having European experience was a plus here.
Cool. So worked on that business, and you were about, as I said, about 13 and a half years or so at Medtronic. Now, did that lead to Welcony? And tell us a little bit about that transition. Now, was that a company that you founded?
No. So I, at some point, you wonder what you want to do with your life. At Medtronic, you can retire with 55. So I left. So I'm technically retired from Medtronic. Okay. And I ended up joining a company that's then called the Magstim company, or the Magstim Group. This was a company that a venture firm had acquired just the prior year. They had also acquired another business. We can talk about these businesses later. And they were looking for a CEO, so it was a great match. I was looking for, maybe trying to be a CEO. Right. They were looking for a CEO. I wanted to stay in brain modulation broadly, so that the modulation of the brain for disorders. And the argument I made to myself and others is deep brain stimulation is an amazing therapy, but it is incredibly expensive. It is brain surgery after all, right? So if you want to treat millions and millions of patients around the world that need treatments for their brain disorders, depression, Parkinson's, even Alzheimer's, you can't do that with deep brain stimulation. So transcranial magnetic stimulation is a non-invasive method to modulate the brain. And it seemed to make a lot of sense to go for less invasive technologies, and that's what excited me to join Magstim.
Yeah, cool. And now Magstim is one of the businesses under Welcony, is that correct?
Yeah, so we grew the company through mostly internal growth, but we also did some acquisitions over the years, well, the last 5 years, I should say. And so really we operate the company as Welcony. No one has really heard much about Welcony because Welcony is not our brand. Welcony is the company, that's where everyone works for. It's our internal brand, if you will. It holds us all together. But we really operate in 4 different, or maybe even 5 different spaces. So, but Magstim was the original company that our investors had acquired. Transcranial magnetic stimulation. That was the company that originally commercialized this technology. So this is a business that really has 2 components. One is a research market. So transcranial magnetic stimulation is a great research tool because you can non-invasively change brain states and see what happens. So it's an amazing tool for scientists, cognitive scientists, other scientists, but it also has clinical applications. So transcranial magnetic stimulation in the United States is approved for treatment-resistant depression. And so that's really the market that makes the clinical difference. So that's Magstim. We recently, well, I shouldn't say recently, 2020, at the heights of the COVID situation, we acquired EGI, the assets of EGI, which is a high-density EEG company from Philips. And we bought this company because we have this long-term vision that transcranial magnetic stimulation needs technology that closes the loop. So EEG measures brain activity, TMS changes brain activity. So if you put those two together, you can build a system that delivers transcranial magnetic stimulation that is truly patient specific. So we deliver the right dose at the right frequency to every patient, no more, no less. So that's why we bought EGI. So these are those two businesses that relate very closely to each other. And then we have a business called Neurosign, which is an intraoperative nerve monitoring business, which shares a lot of technology in that it uses an amplifier, just like an EEG, to measure neuronal activity. It's mostly used for thyroid surgery or parathyroid surgery to make sure that when the surgeon performs the operation that they don't inadvertently damage nerves that are in the surgical field. So that's Neuroscience. We're very excited about how that business is developing, particularly right now in the United States. And then we have Technomed, which is, Technomed is is an entity where we manufacture neurophysiology accessories. Those are needles, EEG cups, and it is a relatively high volume, lower margin business, but it's very attractive. It's growing. We are worldwide, we believe, the highest quality, low cost manufacturer. We do not only manufacture in the Netherlands, but also in Indonesia.
Right. We talked about that earlier. And this is for like EMG tests, EEG tests, right? They're
this is EMG, EEG.
Right. Equipment that's used in the monitoring of the nerves. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Yes. And how many employees in total?
So we are around 500 employees on a worldwide basis. Now that's obviously heavily biased by the number of employees we have in our plant in Indonesia.
Yeah. That's where the manufacturing is located. And how many are in the U.S.?
In the U.S., we have, I need to look this up. Oh, we have about 40 people in the U.S., but that number is rapidly growing. We have about 100 people in the U.K., about 40 or so in the Netherlands. And then we also have 10 or so in Eugene, Oregon.
Awesome. Where I went to school. Great part of the country to be in. You purchased a company out there, if I recall, right?
Yeah, that's EGI. I mentioned that earlier. We bought them from Philips. It was in fact, EGI was founded in Eugene, but now they're part of the Magstim family.
Cool.
We still have we still have presence though in Eugene.
Right. So I'm curious over the arc of your career. Obviously studied both in the U.S. as well as in Germany. Went back to Germany, did your consulting. Worked in operating companies. Medtronic's, of course, hugely successful. Wonderful. And now kind of in a smaller startup, but very, very interesting field. How has kind of your leadership style evolved over that time?
So obviously, at the end of the day, as a CEO, the buck stops with you.
Right.
So what that means is that there's at times enormous stress on you. Yeah. So it's not in a big company. There's always other people that are with you in the boat and that you might report to, and running a small company, being the CEO, obviously puts some stress on you. But that is actually quite enjoyable, I think. Because in a small company you can move relatively fast. Right. Even with 500 people, I just know pretty much everyone still around here. And my leadership has changed in that if you ask people around here, they like when I inspire them. I think people truly buy into this idea, how do we grow a company quickly based on technology? Right. How do we close the loop in EEG? How do we come up with a new TMS technology? How do we launch a new product in intraoperative nerve monitoring? We can move very, very fast. And this is great because, in a big company, that is not always the case. The big company has a safety net.
That's right.
But in a small company, you just go for it. And what's really enjoyable is people come along with you. They don't really work here just to have a job. They work here because they believe in our mission. And that is so important to me. Everyone knows this around me, that nothing ever gets me really annoyed except if someone says that's not my job. So my response to this, when someone says, "Hey, wait, why did you do this? This is my job." I usually say, the right response to that is, "Thank you. You just helped me successful."
Let's turn that around.
I believe, yeah. So my message always is, everyone has responsibility to the customer. If a customer calls with a question, a complaint, or a compliment, even if you're not the right person for this approach, take the responsibility and say, I might not be the person that gets you the right answer, but I take personal responsibility that you do get the right answer. It is that kind of change. It's that kind of attitude that you need in any company, really, but it's something that is incredibly powerful in a small company.
How else do you inspire others, Lothar?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I would say, I don't like to sort of brag and talk about me. How, what I mean?
We're sharing secrets here, Lothar. Our audience is on pins and needles waiting for your response.
Look, I think my team knows that I wouldn't expect anything from any employee that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. I'll just give you some little examples. A couple of months or years ago, really, there was a machine that needed a little adjustment. Really, we needed to change a part. Okay. And we could have flown our technician out, who at the time was living in North Carolina, and fly up to the Twin Cities to make that change. In a big company, of course, that would have happened. I said, no way. I'll just jump in the car, give me the screwdriver, give me the part, I do it myself. Okay. And everyone's saying, that's crazy. The CEO shouldn't be fixing machines. Yeah, the CEO shouldn't be fixing machines. But the image that brought, these customers were truly impressed. So it wasn't about me fixing the machine. It was me engaging with them how to make their TMS program more successful. And we got pictures taken and we sent them around. Mark must have sent them around. Mark runs PR for us. And people were, they made fun of it, but it was inspired. It was a message that I don't feel too good
roll up your sleeves
to show up and roll up my sleeves.
Beautiful.
I think this might be a fault of mine a little bit, that I am willing to do that, but I think it does.
It's a great example. When do you decide if it's time to micromanage someone or stay out of the sandbox, so to speak?
Yeah. So, well, that is occasionally necessary. I prefer the leadership style, and I tend to think that if you tell people sort of the general direction, the objectives, they will do the right thing. And quite frankly, no one gets up in the morning to screw up, right? So everyone wants to do a good job, but sometimes people just don't have the skills. And then you have to micromanage, and hopefully that micromanagement helps the individual be successful, because they might not have the skills. They might need some training. They might need some expertise, but sometimes they might just lack motivation, and occasionally that might even lead to them looking for another opportunity, which is okay. Not everyone fits into what we expect from our employees.
Yeah, makes good sense. And, you're growing so fast, and it's such an intriguing area. And, I'm sure you've got a lot of very, very smart people working for you. But, a CEO's role really is to build that company culture. And how do you go about doing that? And the second question, what's kind of unusual or unique about the company culture?
Well, let me maybe start by saying there was a challenge when I came on board, right? Because the company grew through acquisition. So there was Magstim, and then there was the Technomed acquisition, and then there was the EGI acquisition. Okay. And, being in Whitland, Wales is very different than in Maastricht. It's very different than being in the US.
Eugene,
even Minnesota
Oregon.
is very different in Eugene. And obviously we have Indonesia.
Right.
So, so the one thing I learned from that is that when we did the EGI acquisition, we changed the name of the company, right? So rather than saying Magstim acquired EGI, we said we have Welcony. And Welcony is the parent company, and it has these businesses and these brands under each. And that, I think, made a huge difference why the EGI team felt welcome from day one.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, we actually did spend some time on putting together our values that we share, and they're very simple values, but we repeat them. We hang them up in our room, and if you're interested, I'll just tell you what they are. So it's collaboration and leadership. It is accountability and commitment. By the way, I just talked about accountability and commitment when I gave you the example that I expect everyone to respond to a customer. Respect and integrity, and changing lives.
Wow.
And I can maybe say a little bit more about the last one, changing lives. The one thing I did learn at Medtronic is how important a patient-focused mission is, and we're trying to do this here as well. So we put the patient and the clinician at the center of everything we do, but the way that we execute is by being respectful, having high integrity, show accountability and commitment, but work as a team, collaborate and lead.
Yeah, love it. Fantastic. So, what do you look for when you're hiring, people, making bets on them to, come and join your organization?
Well, so first of all, I like to promote internal people. Nothing is more satisfying than being able to offer the job to someone who's already working for you. Okay. I think often leaders or managers make the mistake that they always look on the outside for bringing talent in, and they might not appreciate the talent that they already have.
Sure.
So I feel very strongly about this. Most of the time, if you see talent in someone, if you give them the next challenge, they rise to the occasion.
Yep.
So that's number one. So look for internal talent, people that have the right commitment, that want to make a difference, and bring them along, give them a chance. Now, of course, they still, that creates another open position. So you need to hire people. Absolutely. And if you grow as fast as we are growing, we do need to hire a lot of people. And I don't know, it sounds weird, but you become wise over the years when you interview people. Sure, you can ask all the questions, you can check all the analytical skills, the team skills, what capabilities they have and what examples they have. But to me, I usually can tell within 15, 20 minutes whether someone is the right candidate. And I can't totally describe it, but what I can tell you is there's a spark. It no longer feels like an interview. It feels like
conversation.
You're already working together. So what I'm looking for is that people during the interview, during the discussions, show curiosity. If they ask me questions and I'm truly curious about the business, me, what we do, then some magic happens, because you don't talk about why they should be joining the company. You actually start talking about how you would approach business problems. So that's what I'm looking for. Obviously, you need to check everything else, but that spark, that we already working together, makes a huge impact on me when I hire people.
Yeah, huge. Do you have a favorite interview question you like to ask, Lothar?
Yes, I do, and most of the time people don't understand it.
Well, let's hear it.
I usually have. So I love to ask, if you're the answer, what's the question?
Oh, that's a good one. What's the best response you've had to that?
Well, sometimes I have to really explain what that means, and sometimes it shocks people. And I'm more, I'm more than happy to explain why I'm asking the question. I really can't say that I can tell you what the best answer to that question is, but I can tell you that if people don't have an answer to that question, I usually tell them that they need to look and develop their own brand, because if they don't know what they are, what they stand for, what they want to accomplish, and what they're good at, then they might not be a really good fit for the company. Right. I want to add one more thing, though, that just brings this up, because I asked this question because that allows them to talk about what they're really good at,
right,
versus trying to sort of talk about the development needs or what they want to accomplish. My advice always to people is to say, you know what? Yes, if you have development needs, you do need to you need to work on them, but that only makes you average. If you're weak on something, you get to average. Always focus on what you're really, really good at. Right? Focus on the things that you're really good at and become even better. Become a superstar in that particular skill. This could be innovation, or that could be inspiring people, or this could be being really good in building financial spreadsheets, but know what that is.
Right.
And so I'm asking that question to just see whether people really have an answer to that question. The people that are most self-aware usually have the best answer to this.
Right. And it starts a conversation, to your earlier point.
Yes.
Right? Because then you're talking about who they are and what they want to be.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Lothar, you've been very, very generous with your time, but we always have one last question that we ask all our guests, and that's, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who perhaps has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Yeah. So never do anything that someone tells you have to do just to develop your career, but your heart isn't in it. Always go for an opportunity that can inspire you, where you get a chance to work with people that can really teach you something, or that you can learn something from. So that's sort of number one. Always go for what inspires you. Don't go what's logically the next step.
Right.
That, I think, is the biggest mistakes that people can make in their career.
Yeah, very true. Well, Lothar Krinke, CEO of Welcony, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.